Welcome to the Life of Hair. My name's James Atkinson, and in this episode we're going to talk about something that is, well, so frustrating. You've spent all day correcting someone's hair, or you've done a massive colour job and you showed them the colour at the end, you've dried it off, you feel like you've poured your heart and soul into it, and the client says, "I don't like it." Well, your heart sinks and you feel terrible. We have all been there, myself included. And so I wanted to talk to you today ways of managing that incident, because we all know there's nothing worse than feeling like you've done your absolute best and the client doesn't think it's good enough. So a great way to prevent your client from being unhappy is in the consultation. Under-promise and overachieve is the solution to 90% of all colour correction. Think about it. If you say to them, your very dark brown tinted hair is going to be blonde by the end of the day, and it's not, how are they going to feel? Disappointed. You're going to have slogged your guts out and got nowhere. But when you have that initial consultation, even if you play down the end result so that they potentially say to you, actually, I'm not willing to go through with this, that is better than them being unsatisfied at the end of it all and leaving a bad review and you doing free rework. Also, in this initial consultation, where you under-promise to overachieve, you need to set out all the potential steps and the cost to getting the desired result. In today's salon environment, nearly 90% of all colour work could fall into the category of colour correction. The reason for that is that we're not just putting on a simple root tint and a few highlights like we were 10 years ago. We're balayaging, we're bleaching over old bleach, we're toning out hair, and all these things create barriers for us that we need to break through. So remember, guys, it's really important that you get all these things across to the client before you actually start. Because once you've started and then you start telling them all the things that they could potentially need, they could feel like they've been tricked into something that they don't want to do. It's time we take control of the consultations. It will really manage those expectations those clients have. One of the other things that I see people really struggling with when it comes to colour corrections as well is time management. There's no point in saying, oh, you might be here 3 hours and they're there 5. They might have somewhere to go. And they're then pressurizing you to get out the salon. And then you can skip steps because you don't want them to sit in the salon any longer than they feel like they need to. So if you think it's going to take 3 hours, tell them it's going to take 4. And if you think it's going to take 4 hours, tell them it's going to take 5. At least if they get out in less time, they won't feel rushed. They'll organize their lives. The other thing that you need to take into account as well is skip steps costs you later. And what I mean by that is if you don't process your toner for long enough because you're trying to rush them out the door, those brassy tones that you've exposed will come back so much faster. So be assured that you spend that time that it really takes to get the job done. And the other problem that I see people facing a lot is when they've done a colour correction and it's not quite gone to plan and they haven't done a really comprehensive consultation. They've ended up getting to a point where they can't lift the hair anymore because it needs a rest between lightening sessions, but they've got this terrible orange result. But darkening that orange hair will make it difficult next time, because as you well know as trained stylists, if you've got someone's hair that's orange and your client doesn't want to see any warmth in their hair, you're going to have to darken it. Now, by darkening it, you are going to make your next lifting process very difficult. Don't worry, guys. I've caught myself out with this one too. I'm speaking purely from experience. So, your client's sitting there, you've got a pretty good idea that their hair's going to go really warm, or you've started to lift their hair and it's gone really warm. If you haven't forewarned them that this is a possibility and then you darken it and you're making your job harder the next time, you might not even get to where you said. Wouldn't it just be better to have that conversation with somebody and say, we are likely going to have to keep your hair pretty warm, orangey, coppery, are you happy with that? Than actually getting to that point and being stuck in a position that you can't get out of. I know which one I'd rather do. And the final really important thing to do is to make sure that as you're going through the process of correcting someone's hair, that you are educating them on exactly what is happening. Don't have a skull and dagger approach to it where you're putting products on at the backwash and not telling the client what's happening. Get them back into the chair when you're putting toners and colours onto their hair, and be honest and realistic with what is happening to their hair. Don't go all the way through the process and surprise them at the end that hasn't quite worked out in the way that you were both hoping. So think about it. It's really straightforward. When you put the bleach on or colour remover or whatever you do to start the process, and you take them to the basin and you rinse it, and they say, how does it look? Don't say, oh yeah, it looks great, when you don't really have any idea until you've brought it back to their chair and you've completely dried it, because you can't tell what the colour really looks like when it's wet. And this is part of having the time to properly do the process. If you didn't allow time for rinsing and drying and checking the colour and rethinking, then you're really going to struggle to get the end result that you had potentially promised that client in the first place. So be realistic with the time. But when they're in the chair, if they are part of the process and you are saying to them, this is what has happened, it is out of my control effectively, because as we well know, there are times where the hair doesn't behave exactly as we were hoping or we expected when we're doing colour correction. We can sit there and we can have an honest conversation with them. This is what has happened. This is what I can do with this hair at this point. As we discussed in the consultation previously, shall we proceed in this fashion? Then you can have a conversation that doesn't totally implicate you at the end of it. So it's really important, guys. The secret to being a successful modern colorist is consultation. It is king to a great result. I hope these 4 tips and tricks have been really useful for you today and you've enjoyed this episode of Life with Hair. If you have, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. It will really help this video if you would scroll all the way down to the bottom and leave me a comment. It really boosts this video so more people can benefit from seeing it.